Hello everyone and welcome back to the UPSC Journey. My name is Babita, you're the Hindu Analysis faculty at UPSC Journey. In today's session, we are going to cover the complete Hindu analysis for 18th of May 2026. This session is going to be very helpful for your all upcoming exams, especially for your UPSC exam. After the completion of this session, you can download PDF of this session from a Telegram channel. Link is in the description box. So we'll start with the first article. And the first article is regarding the ordinance power of the president, where in this ordinance, the president has increased the Supreme Court judges strength from 33 to 37. So as we know that as of now, like previously we had 33 judges, 1 plus CGI, means total 34 judges of Supreme Court. But by this ordinance, now we'll have 37 plus 1 CGI, means total 38 judges in Supreme Court. So, as we know that President has power to bring this ordinance in at central level, as well as the governor has power to bring the ordinance at a state level. So, President Draupadi Murmu has formulated this ordinance. By this ordinance, make changes in it bring Supreme Court Number of Judges Amendment Ordinance Act 2026, very important, and Article 123 of the Constitution, the ordinance power given to President, means Article 123 give power to President. Very important that Article 123 give power to the President to form an ordinance when both the houses or maybe a single house is not in the session. So we'll look like in 1950 we had only 7 judges, means 7 judges plus 1 CGI. So consider one also, na? So it's maximum number of judges excluding CGI. So like here, if we sing 7 means we had 8, that including one CGI. So in 1950 we had 7 judges. Then after doing amendment, and we are doing continuously amendment in the Supreme Court Number of Judges Act 1956, means we are doing amendment in this act. Supreme Court Judges Act of 1956. By doing amendment in this act, we are continuously increasing the strength of the Supreme Court judges. And in like 1956, we had 10 judges, one including one, and there was also one CGI, so means 11. And in 60 we have 13, then 17, then 25, then 33, 30, 33, and then 37. Means in 2026 we are going to have 37 judges plus one CGI. Means as of total we have 38 judges of Supreme Court. And this is like to cover the backlogs of over more than 93,000 cases, which is more than 6 figure, and the court is going to be because we all know that already there's a pendency of cases, and the session is going to be for summer session, who are also going to for a summer session, and there will be a partial working days in June. And to reduce this backlog of cases, we are going to increase this judges strength. So first of all, we'll look at President. Wait a minute. Okay, so President Draupadi Murmu has promulgated an ordinance increasing the number of judges in Supreme Court to the 37 plus 1 CGI, means excluding CGI. So total we are going to have 38 judges. The May 16 Gazette notification say that Parliament is not in session and the President is satisfied that the circumstances exist which render it necessary to take immediate action and issue of ordinance, because ordinance can only be issued when the parliament session is not in working, or you can say the Lok Sabha is not in session. But if any situation arises where president feel that it's a condition of immediate action and we need to form an ordinance, on that basis president can form an ordinance. So Article 123 gave President power to formulate an ordinance when Parliament is not in session or immediate action is required. So when Parliament is not in session means when there is maybe not having both the houses or maybe not having one house. So in this scenario, Article 123 gives power to president to formulate an ordinance. But this is not an absolute power. Like president not on his own choice and not on his own will can formulate an ordinance. The president cannot issue ordinance purely by own choice. To form this like ordinance, he need to have a aid and advice of the Council of Ministers under Article 74. Like in Article 74, it mentioned that there will be a Council of Ministers that will aid and advise President. So before bringing in an ordinance, President also need the aid and advice of Council of Ministers. So it's not like absolute power to the President to bring in ordinance. President act as a constitutional head and not an independently. Means president cannot form any order independently. Either it's in a like even if it's an ordinance, like it required the ultimate approval of the president, but still president is not free by hand like take any arbitrary decision. Even for forming an ordinance, he need aid and advice of the Council of Ministers. And ordinance validity means how far this ordinance can exist. So it operates for 6 weeks from reassemble of parliament unless approved. Means let's suppose we know that there can be a 6 months gap in parliament sessions. So after 6 months there will be a session of parliament, and after the formation of this session the time period is of 6 weeks. So like if we talk about total time period, then there will be a 6 month plus 6 week time frame, or you can say roughly for 7.5 months the ordinance can exist. So there will be a time frame of 6 months, maximum gap of between two sessions, and once the session of parliament will be approved, then after that within a 6 week there need to be approval from both the houses of parliament. Then this ordinance will be continue as a simple law. But if it fail to do so, then this will lapse within 6 weeks from the reassemble of the parliament. Article 124 clause 1 says that there shall be a Supreme Court of India consisting of Chief Justice of India and such member and other judges as Parliament may determine by law. So this article is very important. That 1, 2, 3 article say about president power to form an ordinance. But article 124 clause 1 that say that increasing the strength of Supreme Court judges is merely lie with parliament. Means parliament by law may increase the strength of the judges. And as we have seen that from 1950 to 2026, the government has increased the strength from 10(7) to 37 by doing amendment in Supreme Court Judges Act of 1956. This ordinance will be placed in both the House of Parliament when it convenes. Means when there will be session of Parliament, it will be placed on both the houses, and it will be ceased to operate if 6 weeks expire without any resolution passed on. Means it will be no longer will be a law when there will after the session of Parliament within 6 weeks it will not be approved or given a approval from both the houses. So it is necessary to have resolution must be passed in both the houses of parliament. The president can withdraw the ordinance at any time. Means president, it feels like the condition is over and there is no need of further this of ordinance, then president can withdraw the ordinance at any time. This ordinance is going to amend the section 2 of the Supreme Court Judges, Number of Judges Act of 1956 to replace the word 33 to 37. So means as of now in Supreme Court Judges Number of Act 1956, we have section 2 which mentioned that there are 33 judges, and now this is going to be replaced with 37 judges. Correct? An ordinance formulated by President has maximum validity of 6 months and 6 weeks. 6 months is a maximum gap between both the session, and 6 weeks is the time frame after the both the session are in working, and after that session of parliament, then there will be a maximum period of 6 weeks. The governor of state can also issue ordinance under Article 213. So under Article 123, President. At the same time, under Article 213, Governor of the state has power to form an ordinance. India, when the state legislative assembly is not in session, like for president, when both the session of parliament, both the houses of parliament are not in session, then the president can form an ordinance. At the same time, when the state legislative assembly is not in session, then governor can form an ordinance. However, ordinance enact a law that falls outside the purview of parliament competence, it will be considered as a void. Means like if any ordinance which is enacted without or outside the jurisdiction of parliament competency, then that ordinance will be declared as a null and void. So like we have case of DC Vardhava with the state of Bihar in 1987. This case challenged a series of ordinances issued by Governor of Bihar between 1967 to 1981 on the very subjects, like, and some of which were formulated several times without being placed before the state legislature. Means this ordinance power is given as a positive point of view to the Indian Constitution that during a time of emergency, when both the houses are not in session, this can be used as a tool to run the system, but that should not be used in a negative way, that we are bypassing the legislature process. So this is one point of view, that although we are formulating ordinance, but that ordinance is not to bypass the legislature process. So this was one case, because in Bihar there was a continuous ordinance on various subjects without placing before the state legislature. Supreme Court struck down all the ordinance as a unconstitutional and held that reformulation of an ordinance is a fraud, and on the Constitution it is a supervision of that. A democratic legislative process. The court also held that an ordinance lapses automatically if it is not approved by the legislature within 6 weeks. So it will not be considered as a no more act when it will be not approved by the state legislature or by the parliament houses within 6 weeks of its reassemble, and cannot be continued by reformulation. Means if there are session of the parliament or session of state legislature, it must be passed within 6 weeks to have its continuance or to have its existence. Otherwise, after 6 weeks, it will be considered as a void or considered as a lapse of the ordinance. So this is about how the parliament has power to enact or to increase the strength of judges, how this is going to have increased this change in number of Supreme Court judges Act 1956 and going to replace word 33 by 37. The maximum validity can be of 6 months and 6 weeks from the date of its formulation. The governor has also same power under Article 213 of the Constitution, and when the state legislative assembly is not in session. And this is very important, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So far we have done 8 time amendment in the Supreme Court Number of Judges Act of 1956. So we have done 8 time amendment. Now talking about next article that talks about Ebola outbreak in Congo is a global emergency, say WHO. So there's an Ebola virus outbreak in Congo, and more than 300 suspect cases have seen, and nearly 88 deaths have reported so far. So WHO declared that Ebola outbreak in Congo and Uganda is a public health emergency of international concern. Over 300 suspected cases and 88 deaths reported. WHO said that this outbreak does not meet the criteria of pandemic emergency like COVID. Means this is not considered as severe as COVID-19 as of now, but because this is very fatal, and as of now it advised against the closure of international border. so that there will be a preventive measure. So it's preventive measure that there will be a closure of international borders. Ebola is highly contagious and can be contracted by bodily fluid like such as vomit, blood, and semen. Means it can be spread from one person to another person, or it's contagious means can be spread from one person to another person like fluids such as vomit, blood, and by through semen also. This disease it causes is very rare, although it's very rare, but it's very fatal in nature. EVD, formerly known as Ebola hemorrhagic fever, Ebola hemorrhagic fever, it's a severe fever with often fatal infectious illness. Means it's called infectious illness and cause a very severe symptoms. And it belongs to the ortho Ebola virus gene of Phyllobovirida family. Very important. It's belonging to ortho Ebola virus genus of a Phyllobovirida family. Like if you look into the transmission, it transmits from animal to humans. Means it's zoonotic in nature. Zoonotic, like when a disease is spread from animal to human, it considered as a zoonotic. Fruit bats of the Petropodia family. So very important that it's Petropodia family is considered as a natural host of this Ebola virus. It's very important that Petropodia family is considered as a host of this Ebola virus. It transmits to the humans through close contact with blood, secretion, organs, or bodily fluid of infected animals like bats, chimpanzee, gorilla, monkeys. Because it like transmit from animal to human, and it can be spread by direct contact of like can be of fluid secretion or by a contaction. But in humans, it can spread by through direct contact, like through if we have a broken skin or a mucous membrane blockage is there, then it can be spread from one human to another human. It can also spread with blood or bloodly fluids. Like if a person is sick with or has died from Ebola, then the object which are contaminated with like fluid like bed, clothing. So if a person who has died with Ebola virus, then the subject objects around him that are contaminated, like clothing, bedding, can also impact and can also transfer from one human to another person. Symptoms are like extreme fever, extreme fatigue, muscle pain, headache, and sore throat. So these are the common symptoms like having extreme fatigue, muscle pain, having severe fever, and the advanced symptoms like vomiting, diarrhea, rashes, and it also impact your kidney and liver functioning. And in some cases, it's severe internal and external bleeding. So these are the symptoms of Ebola virus. As of now, the WHO said it's not meeting the criteria of pandemic, but it's also a very severe in nature, and it is belonging to ortho Ebola family of Phyllobovirida family. It's zoonotic in nature, means it can spread from animal to human, and same it can spread from human to human by the direct contact of skin or by mucous membrane. It can also spread from person who has died from the Ebola or person is contaminated. Symptoms we have seen that there can be a extreme symptoms of kidney failure and external or internal bleeding. Like if we talk about the fatality rate, like how fatal is this? EBD is highly lethal, means it's very dangerous. Rate vary from 25% to 90% depending upon the severity of this virus. So means out of 100, they can be 25 to 90% people vary on the fatality of this. So it's very fatal in nature, and there need to be proper prevention for this. And because of that, the government is saying to closure of international border because it is very harmful in nature, and once it got spread, it's infectious illness. Okay, now talking about next article that talks about India and Netherlands upgraded bilateral ties, signing 17 new pacts. Means India and Netherlands have signed one MOU which consists of 17 pacts. Means government of India and Netherlands is going to work on the 17 key resources like on water resources, semiconductor, innovation, defense, sustainability, mobility by the collaboration of Tata Electronics and by through a Dutch company of ASML. So India and Netherlands is going to have a collaboration for the 17 items, or we going to say have for 17 resources. So India Netherlands upgraded a strategic partnership of 17 MOU agreements. Very important. The key area of cooperation, like both the countries are going to have area of cooperation under water management, agriculture and health, renewable energy and sustainability, critical minerals and supply chain, semiconductor project under like Tata Electronics and ASML, a Dutch electronics company. Both the countries going to have a close partnership in innovation, defense and mobility. So by all this key area, government is going to cover when Netherlands means on this all key areas, both the government of India and Netherlands is going to do a improvement, and both the countries are going to have more focused on all this 70 agreements. Netherlands, India largest European Union trading partner after Germany. ASML is global leader in the chip making equipment. So by having a global leader chip equipment, ASML and Tata Electronics, we're going to have a better semiconductor projects, as well as we're going to have a very close look on the critical minerals, which are very vital for EV, means electronic vehicles, electronics and renewable energy sources. Both the countries are going to have a close cooperation. And then we're going to have Dutch expertise of water technology and flood control. So the important point is that India and Netherlands have signed a 17 pact MOU where both the countries are going to have more focused area of water management, agriculture and health. Renewable energy means providing a more boost to the renewable energy and having a more sustainability. The collaboration for critical minerals and for the supply chain, so that import dependency for both the countries can be reduced, and having a self-generating economy in terms of critical minerals, like focusing on semiconductor project, and they're going to be have a close cooperation in terms of innovation, defense, and in mobility sectors. How this is going, how this 17 pacts MOU is going to help India. It's going to boost India's semiconductor self-reliance economy, because we are going to less depend on import, and we're going to have more research and development in semiconductor sector, which will make us self-reliant. It's going to strengthen energy security and supply chains, means we're going to have more energy security and supply chains. And apart from this, we're going to expand India's strategic footprint in Europe and Indo-Pacific region. We are going to have a close cooperation and close reliance with the European and India-Pacific region. So this fact is going to be very helpful for both the countries, for both India and for Netherlands. And India is going to have a close relation for this key areas. Next is article is about diversification gains. This article is totally about how we need to improve our export. Means we need to diversify our gains. Gains is what it means. We need to increase our export. As of now, India is heavily import dependent country, but also we are exporting to the other countries. So in that scenario, we need to diversify our gains. We need to diversify our export, and at the same time we need to maintain a competitiveness in terms of cost and quality. Means if we are increasing our export, at the same time we need to maintain the cost of that product must be a competitiveness, is compatible or must be a competitive in the European markets as well. There should be a proper quality of that. Means there will be a no degrade in quality if we are increasing our export. Just because we want to reduce our cost, we cannot reduce the quality. Means at the same time, we have to increase the competitiveness of our goods. At the same time, we have to increase the quality also. So India need to improve export competitiveness in terms of cost and quality. Means we need to improve export in both terms, in terms of both cost and both in quality. Despite varied trade disruptions, merchandise export grows nearly 14%. Means we know that there's ongoing war situations, but even after this war-like situation or this trade disruption, we have increase in merchandise export by 14% in April 2026, and that reached to the 43.6 billion. So we have like increase in mercantile export. According to government of data, at last we have 20 exporting sectors, means we are exporting in more than 20 sectors, and now we have added 17 or more new destinations, means we are diversifying our export. We are looking for the more destiny for more countries for our export, so that we can diversify our trade. So government has added 17 or more new destinations in the last year. For example, handloom products are now exported to 29 more countries. So means we are exporting to more than 29 countries than in 2014 to 2025. So as of now, we are increasing our exporting countries. Means we have targeted the destinations which are going to have increase in help of our export. So we are increasing our exporting partners. The non-oil export has rose up to 9%. We have like 9% increase in our non-oil export, that around like 40 billion. Diversification, 20 sectors added to 17 new destination in last year, means we have diversified our trade in more than 17 new destinations. The share of services in total export has risen to about 49% compared to 39% in 2014. I mean, in terms of services, we also have increase in export from 39% to 49% in 2014 to 2026. So there is an increase in export of services from 39% to 49% in 2014. So by this doing this diversification of strategy, we are expanding our markets and reducing the dependency on few regions. Because if we are going to diversify our strategy, we are going to diversify our gains or our export, we are going to have less dependency on few regions. Like as of now, because of this war situation, if we have limited exporter countries, then we might feel a dependency. But to expanding markets, we're going to reduce the dependency on this few regions. After that, we're going to have export competitiveness, means we are exporting our goods at a competitive level and need to improve the cost and quality at the same time. To bring a product in the market, the product must be a competitive and at the same time the competitive in terms of cost and in terms of quality. Means at the same time we need to maintain both cost and quality to have a better competition market for our goods. Services export boom. Indian IT and AI sector increasingly dominate in global trade. So we need to have more focus on service export. Global disruption, regional crisis directly affect trade flow. We all know that when there is a disruption in the world, the trade always get impacted. So this also affect the trade flow. Diversification strategy shield India from the shock, because if we have multiple partners, if we have like diverse regions or we have a diverse market, then we will able to observe the shock very easily, because this diversification strategy will work as a shield for India from the external shock markets. The policy focus, like to bring our product in a competitive manner, we need to have a competitiveness. We need to more focus on innovation, and there need to be a more free trade agreements, and there need to be a access of new markets. Means we need to diversify our markets so that a product will get a fair prices and there will be a rise of internal goods. Okay. After that, second, we talk about like growth plus diversification. But long-term success depends on competitiveness and resilience against global disruption. Okay, we all talking about growth and diversification. Means we need growth and diversification. But this both things will long run only when we will work on competitiveness of our goods, and that competitiveness will make a resilient and against the global disruption. When our competitiveness is there in the goods, then it will observe that global disruption. So we need growth and diversification, but for long term, we need to have a more competitiveness of the goods. Clear? So this is about how we need to diversify our export, and at the same time, there should be a competitiveness of goods and quality so that there will be a more market for our Indian goods. Okay, how this diversification strategy is going to reduce the dependency. We are going to have more export competitiveness and diversification. For this, we need to be more policy focused, means having more policies and innovation, free trade agreement, and access to the new market. So this all things will help to diversify our export. Okay. So next article is about Oslo Summit. So there's going to be a summit in Oslo. So Oslo is the capital of Netherlands. So in this Oslo Summit, how India is northward turned, means how India is looking for the northern countries or for the art, like Arctic countries. So India's turned toward northward in Oslo Summit. Why does the news? Prime Minister Narendra Modi attended the third India Nordic Summit in Oslo. He is going to have attended this summit on 18th or 19th of May. And this is going to be a third India Nordic Summit in Oslo. Very important. India upgraded engagement with Nordic countries. So Nordic countries are the countries like Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, Iceland. So all these countries are combinedly known as Nordic countries. Means they're going to be a summit and in the summit, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, India, all these Nordic countries going to participate. And the most focus of this summit is to strategic cooperation in technology, supply chain, maritime security, and green economy. As this whole summit is going to have more focus on technology. Wait a minute. Okay. So it's going to be have a focus on supply chain, maritime security, and green economy. Arctic geopolitics highlighted a new frontier for Indian foreign policy. Means we are looking forward for the Arctic geopolitics, because we know that Arctic region is a very hidden region and the region is not explored very much. We have not explored this, or we'll say the world has not explored that Arctic region. So now whole like economies, either USA, Russia, China, so whole economies are looking toward the Arctic region. Now India's Arctic presence, India is an observer, like India is not part of this Arctic countries, or we are not part of this Arctic Council, but India is an observer, means we have an observer status in Arctic Council since 2013. We have a research facilities like Himadri Station. We have research center Himadri in Norway, very important, and India is a Arctic Council observer member in 2013. Very important from exam point of view. And at the same time, we have observatory of Guru Vedat Atmospheric Lab. It's an observatory. India has given observer status in 2013, correct? The Arctic, one insulated from geopolitical rivalry, is emerging as a competition over shipping routes, energy resources, and critical minerals and strategic infrastructure. Because this area is so much isolated from the geopolitical rivalry, and because of this isolation, now the most of economies, either USA, Russia, China, India, or other economies also looking toward this Arctic region for shipping routes, for energy resources, for critical energy, minerals, and for strategic infrastructure. India is not an Arctic nation, but it's like a Arctic stakeholder. Arctic is warming more than 3 times faster than the global average temperature. So this is also a concern that Arctic is warming day by day, and it's warming more than 3 times faster than global average temperature. So it's also concerning. The 8 Arctic states whose territories fall in the Arctic region. So here we see. So these are the countries which share a boundary with Arctic Ocean. USA, Canada, Greenland, we have Iceland, then Norway, Sweden, Finland, Russia. So here seeing that the 8 countries which share territories with Arctic region are member of Arctic Council. These are like Canada, Denmark, Finland, Iceland, Norway, Russia, Sweden, and the US. All Arctic Council members' decision is required to become member of this Arctic Council. Require consists of 8 Arctic states. Means if any country want to be part of this Arctic Council, then there is required of consent of all the 8 Arctic states and happen in the consultation with permanent participation members. So there's need of a consent of all the 8 countries if any country want to be member of this Arctic Council. So look into the map very clearly that USA, Canada, Greenland, Iceland, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Russia. These are the Arctic. These are the regions or these are the countries which share a region with Arctic region. Now talking about one horse race and not Trump for the democracy. So this article is all about that ruling of one party is not a symbol of democracy. Means if there is no opposition, there is no multi-party, then having a one single party will not be considered as a democracy. So this article is very important because of this ongoing election in Assam, Bengal, Tamil Nadu. So this article is raising a concern that day by day the rule of opposition is decreasing, and because of that there is only one single party rule, and that important role of opposition is decreasing day by day. So far as election are concerned, do not consider competition essential to an electoral outcome. Section 53, subclause 3 of a Representation of People Act of 1951. So this People Representation Act of 1951 says that competition is not, like this act is generally not considering competition as essential for electoral outcome. But as we all know that competition is very much necessary to have a free and fair election. Means it's very required thing. But this People Representation Act of 1953 section subclause 3 does not consider that competition is essential for the electoral outcome. So this is one thing that this act not consider a competitive essential as electoral outcome. Means if there will be a single person, then that will also be provided unopposed winner. So having opposition is very much required because running a single horse is not will be considered as a victory. Otherwise, one can have a like if we don't have a multiple parties or we don't have a rule of opposition, then it can be say that one can have a contestants, but no contest means we going not having a contest on the basis of electoral outcome will came. A winner without game and a people's representation without a single vote cast in favor is liking a walk over killing both the game and the spirit. Means this will not work as a base of a democratic nation, because in India we a country which form a basis on the democratic values. But if there will be a no opposition, if there will be a no multi parties, then this will not going to have a value of democratics, and this will going to kill the spirit of game. In this article said that competition is a hemoglobin for democracy. Means there should be a competition between the parties, and out of that all parties the best should be chosen. So democratic core values are not just election. Means of values of democratic nation is not just having election, but the values are having of more meaningful and fair elections. Means having only election of only a single party is getting majority and single party is winning, means on that time opposition is losing the stake, and if there will be no opposition, then there will be a no check on the power of the government. There will be no criticize on the bad moves or on the failure of the government policy. So role of opposition in a democratic nation is very much required, and for having a meaningful and fair contest of election is very much required and is a core essential of democratic nation. So legal framework, the Representation of People Act of 1951 ensured that there should be a free and fair election. But this People Representation Act 1951 only talks about fair and free election, but did not talk about like if there will be a single party. That single party will be also declared as a winner unopposedly. Like example, electoral concern West Bengal, Assam's cited for imbalance of competition, because in both the state we have seen that there was no role of opposition, like there was a single party majority, and that ultimately created imbalance in competition. So for healthy democracy required multi-parties, we all know, and out of that multi-party, the people should have right to choose the best party. And ideologically, we should have given a diversity and voters' choice. And because if there will be a single party, then voter will not have any choice. If that single party will receive only a single vote, also if people will like go for nota, and if single vote will be considered as a winner for that party, then what was the use of that? So there need to provide a multiple parties and giving a voters more choices, because one horse race, when opposition is weak or suppressed, its legitimacy erodes. Because when there will be a single party, there will be a no opposition, then this legitimacy of this process is eroded. There is no use of this having elections. So fairness principle is very much required, that equal opportunity for the candidates, and they need to have a transparency in the process. So that's why we require a multiple parties. Institutional rule, election commission ensure level playing field, means at the same time election commission should ensure that there should be a level playing field, means there should be no biasness in the election process, and there should be a equal opportunity to all the parties. And by doing this, public trust is very much required, because genuine competition build a confidence in democratic institute. Because if there will be a free and fair election, people having more choices, people having more options from multiple parties to choose their favorite party, which actually work for them, will be create a public trust, and that public trust is a very much required in a democratic institute. So building public trust is also very much essential. Next, like if you talk about the conclusion, so democracy flourish only when the competition plus contestants remain genuine. One horse race walking, the spirit of representation erode public trust, and the election turns merely into a formalities. Because when only there is one horse race, only a one horse is running, then there will be contesting elections is like only having a formality, means people will not have a equal access or equal representation. So this is will consider as a negative remark on the democracy. So having a good faith in the democracy, having building trust in peoples or in citizens of the country, there need to be a fair contested election, and there will be a important role of opposition also. So this is about today's session. We first do a recap. So first of all, we have studied about increasing the strength of Supreme Court judges from 33 to 37. Very good. It's like in this article, we have seen that Article 123 give power President to form an ordinance, but on the basis of aid and advice of Council of Ministers. Article 74. Ordinance lasts for 6 weeks, and if we say like maximum validity is for 6 months and 6 weeks from the date of its formulation. The governor of state can also issue ordinance under Article 213. However, after that, we have seen Ebola outbreak in Congo and Uganda, saying by WHO. It's a zoonotic disease, and symptoms like severe fatigue, muscle pain, and it like spread from animal to human and can also transmit from human to human also, and it's infectious or contagious in nature, which can spread from one person to another person. And death rate vary from 25% to 19%, meaning it's very fatal in nature. After that, we have seen India and Netherlands pact signed up 17 agreement pact of key areas of cooperation like water management, agriculture and health, renewable energy and sustainability. After that, critical energy, mineral supply chain, semiconductor project, and then in sector of innovation, defense and mobility. After that, we have seen that there is a need to diversify our gains or diversify our export. Means we need to have more cooperation, we need to have more export countries. So we have like added more than 17 or more new destination for export, and the non-oil export have reached to 40 billion. And how this diversification strategy is going to help us, because by this we're going to have less dependency on few regions. They're going to be have more competitiveness of the products by maintaining cost and quality. At the same time, we need diversification and growth, but this long term can success depend on competitiveness of the Indian goods. After that, we have seen this Oslo summit. In Oslo summit, this is going to be a third India Nordic summit. In this Nordic summit, countries are like Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, Iceland, and they are going to have a cooperation for technology, supply chain, maritime security, and green economy. We have research observatory like Himadri Station and Guru Vedanta atmospheric. वहाँ पे laboratory है, that is observatory, and India is observer state since 2013. We are not part of this council this summer. And after that, so this is a map of all the countries which share a boundary or territory with Arctic Ocean. After that, we have seen article that one horse race is not for the democracy, means only having a rule of single party will not consider as a democracy. And after that, we have seen that legal framework that People Representation Act ensure that there should be free and fair election. And last, we have concluded that to have a democracy flourish only when the competition and contestants remain genuine, or there will be a no one horse race. So this will because this one horse race will erode people trust, and election will turn only into a formalities. So this is about like today's session. I hope you like the session. After the session, you can download PDF from a Telegram channel. Thank you so much everyone. Till then, thank you so much.